Art Club. My name is Annie and today I'm going to show you how to use shading in your drawing. So why do we want to use shading in our drawing? You might have made a nice line drawing, something like this. So here I've taken a mushroom and I've just drawn a really simple line drawing of it. And it's nice, I'm happy with it. But it doesn't look very three-dimensional. So I want to add something to give it that three-dimensional look. So what I do is I use shading. So this is the difference. You can see here I've used just a pencil, so it's just using simple materials to create all these dark shadows all around here and under the cap here. And what it does is it makes your drawing suddenly look really kind of lifelike and three-dimensional. And it can seem at first like, oh, how do I get from here to here? It can seem quite complicated. But if we work through in just a few sort of slow, simple steps, you should be able to get there. So let's have a go. So what will you need to start shading? It's very simple. All you need is a pencil, a rubber, and a piece of paper. Now you might have some different types of pencils, so here's my little selection here. And you can see that some of them have different names on them. So this is a 2H. And then down here we've got a 3B. So basically all you need to know is that the harder a pencil is, so the sharper that line is going to be, it's going to be an H pencil. So a 2H is pretty hard. A 5H is even harder. So it's kind of sharper, scratchier. And then when you get into the B's, you've got here, it's 2B. So it's quite a lot softer. You can see it comes out darker. And then we can go all the way down. I've got a 5B here. And you can see that's even softer. It kind of smooths onto the paper nicer. And if you've got a pencil and you've got no idea what it is, it doesn't have a name on it, it's almost certainly an HB. And an HB is kind of just in the middle. It's quite a good one to kind of get going with, an HB. But if you want to add really, really dark shadows, maybe you want to go into these high Bs over here. So before we do anything, we're going to warm up. Drawing is kind of like anything. If you launch straight into it, it can be quite hard to get going. So you want to do the equivalent of like a nice little stretch before you go for a run. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pick up my pencil. I've got a B here, but you can use whatever you've got. And I'm just going to start by kind of doing a few little doodles. So I'm going to start by going from really, really light. I'm just sort of tracing my pencil over the paper, seeing how light I can make it by hardly touching the pencil on the paper at all. And then I'm going to see what happens when I just kind of press my pencil into the paper a bit more. It starts to get really nice and dark. And I'm just going to have a play around with that, going from really light, pressing a little harder, and then even more until I get super, super dark. And then I might just try sort of playing around, making a few little hatches, so sort of layering up my pencil with lots of little lines, a few scribbles. I'm just warming up my hand really. And you'll end up with a page kind of filled with lots of different marks, lots of different lines. And maybe it feels like, oh, but I just want to get on with my drawing. But all of this really, really helps. It just makes you really practiced at how you can use your pencil. See if you can get a really nice smooth transition from going really dark to really light. You can see I'm making little notes as I go along as well, just to remember, oh, that pencil made that mark and it was really scratchy and I'm not sure I want to draw with it that much. But this B pencil, that was lovely and smooth, so maybe I'll use that in my drawing. So have a play around with your pencil and see how you get on. And then this is kind of the next step. What you want to do is make some little squares, doesn't matter what size they are, and you're going to go from light to dark. So filling in each square, and I'm trying to make it a nice smooth covering. So let me show you. If I take my pencil and I'm pressing really hard, you get these kind of like scratchy lines. If I soften how I hold my pencil a little bit, so I'm not gripping it, I'm just letting it sort of rest gently in my hand, I get something that's much smoother. And I can still make it darker, so I'm pressing in a bit harder, but just keeping it still quite sort of softly held in my hand. So you can make one of these going from really light up to dark, because this is all that shading is. It's all the different shadows going from the lightest to the darkest. And these ones are really important. These ones in the middle are just as important as these. So let's have a go at that. So now I'm going to show you how I would start a shaded drawing, and what I'm using here is a pear as my subject matter, but it doesn't really matter what you choose. It might even be that you're drawing from a photograph, and that's absolutely fine. The same kind of techniques that we do in this drawing right now will still apply. So the first thing I do when I start a shaded drawing is I have a really good look at what it is that I'm drawing. So I'm looking for the areas that are darkest and the areas that are lightest. And the best way I find for doing that is I actually half close my eyes, or I kind of unfocus them. And when I do that, it takes all the detail away, and I can just see these kind of blocks of dark and light. So if you look here, you should be able to see, if you half shut your eyes, there's this kind of really little light section just here. And that's because I've got a window over this side, and this light is kind of raying in and hitting it just here. And then over on this side, this whole side of it is in shadow. Particularly down the bottom here, it's in really deep dark shadow. If you're looking at your object and you're thinking, I can't really see the shadows in there, one thing that is quite good to do is to just pop a light shining onto it, and you can see it makes it much more dramatic. So over here on this side, it becomes this really deep dark shadow, and then this much brighter part all over here. So now that we've had a good look, we can start drawing. So I'm all set up now, and what I'm going to begin by doing is just a very simple sort of line drawing of my pear. So I'm really looking at the shape of it, and I'm just going around the outer edge, just trying to draw that shape as good as I can. And as you point out, I hardly ever get this right first time round. So your rubber is going to be really important here, because you can go back in, make little adjustments. Like I can see here, I've got that shape a little bit wrong, so I'm going to bring it a bit further out. Bring it nice down here. And I'm trying to draw this very gently, because this is really just to guide me for the rest of the drawing. So I don't want it to be a really thick, dark line. Having a look at this stem now, which isn't a kind of perfect shape, it's quite kind of wibbly wobbly, so I'm going to try and get that into my drawing. And you can see that I'm left with kind of extra lines here where I've maybe not done it quite right the first time. So I'm just going to go back in with the rubber now and just clean that up. Okay, so I'm happy with my shape now, and I'm going to start thinking about putting in the shading. So I'm going to start by blocking in this area of darkness which is like all over this side and kind of on this bottom section here. So the thing about shading is you can start really quite bold and you can always kind of change things as you go along. So you can see I'm kind of holding my pencil quite gently and I'm doing kind of small kind of circular kind of oval shapes with my pencil to try and get something really nice and smooth. Just building it up and up. So it might feel like you just want to do like, oh, just this tiny bit at the edge, but really look at your object, because on this, the shading comes right over almost to the center of the pear. So I'm just going to carry on doing that for a bit. Okay, so I've been putting in this kind of darker shadow across here, and now I'm going to have a look over at this whole section here which I've left just as the white of the paper. And if I look at my pear, there is this kind of bright highlight here which I'm going to leave just as the white of the paper. But pretty much everything else needs some little bit of shading in there because it still has a little bit more darkness to it. So I'm just going to use my pencil really gently and try and build up something a little bit lighter over on this side of the pear where the light is hitting it. And as I'm working, I'm sort of noticing as I go that actually this side probably needs to be a bit darker. So in a minute I'll go in and make those adjustments. If you can see how I'm kind of going around this white highlight here, this nice bright highlight, just leaving it empty. I'm trying to make a kind of nice soft edge so it's not like a harsh line around it. So I'm using these kind of small sort of circular movements with my pencil. So I'm just going to put that in, and then I think I'll come back and maybe put some slightly darker shadows in. Okay, so now that I've got the kind of shading on this side done, yeah, it's becoming really clear to me that I need to darken this side quite a lot. So I'm going to just layer up my pencil and I'm going to press in a little bit harder. And this is what helps your picture look really three-dimensional. If you have some areas that are really very dark and then some areas that are really very bright, it makes your object look much more realistic. So if your picture is if you feel like it looks a bit flat, see if there's some areas where you can make it much darker. Okay, so I'm much happier now with the kind of general overall shading. You might notice that I'm avoiding this little bit here, and that's just because it requires a little bit of concentration, and so I kind of wanted to warm up by doing this kind of large area and then go in and think about how to deal with this stalk. So even this stalk is being affected by the light that's coming in, so this side over here is much lighter than the side that's over here. So I'm just going to go in with my pencil, and it's exactly the same process. It's just that I'm taking a little bit of time and using kind of smaller little circles to put this shading in. And kind of concentrating on these small little details can really help you with your drawing. I'm looking at this kind of little dark area where the stem hits the body of the pear and putting that in nice and dark as well. Okay, so that's getting there now. The other thing I'm noticing is that when I did my first bit of drawing, I put this line in all the way around. And now that it's there, that line looks quite strong. So I'm just going to go in with my rubber and just soften it up so that I'm just left with my nice shading. Because sometimes if you have like a really strong line around something, it stops it looking that nice three-dimensional way. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. So I just brought you in a bit closer so you can just start to see how I'm going to sort of finesse this drawing. You know, it's absolutely fine as it is, and I could leave it like that. If you want to kind of keep building it up, then you should. So I'm just going to kind of work in with some areas and really darken them, like particularly down here. There's quite a strong shadow down here. I'm just going to have a think about this highlight because it's maybe just a tiny bit too bright at the moment. So I'm going to see what happens if I just very carefully kind of soften that a little bit. And as I'm doing that, I keep looking up at my object and kind of half shutting my eyes to have a look at it and seeing how I'm getting on. Right. And what I'm seeing is I've actually made that too dark. So your rubber at all times is really handy, but particularly when you're doing shading, you can almost use it like you're drawing with it. So right now I'm drawing in this highlight, this bright highlight here with my rubber. So I'm just going to keep having a little sort of layering up my marks here, seeing how I go, and then we'll check in again in a bit. So I'm at a point now where I'm pretty happy with what I've got going on here. One thing I might do is, because my pear has actually got some little markings on it, now I might start adding those. But only once I've got kind of all my shading in am I going to start to put those in. So just quite gently adding in these kind of almost little freckles that the pear is covered in. So if you're doing a drawing which has lots and lots of detail in it, put those basic shadings in first. So block in your darkest areas, block in where you've got those mid-tones, and then leave those nice bright highlights clear. And then you can layer up your detail on top of that. It's much easier to do once you've already got all that nice shading in. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed learning about shading, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what drawings you make. Just remember that with all kind of artistic activities, it takes a bit of time and a bit of practice to kind of get where you want to get, but you will get there. So if you've enjoyed this, make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you can see Art Club's other videos, and also to give them a like on Facebook and Instagram so you can see what they're up to. Have a lovely day. See you soon. Bye.